Hi everyone and welcome to my new video. It's finally time to set up my brand new bullet journal, and because I've been listening to a lot of Taylor Swift lately, I decided to go for a TTPD, which means Tortured Poets Department, inspired theme. For my notebook, I chose this Lovelock journal from Notebook Therapy, which I don't think they sell anymore, but in case you are interested in their notebooks, you can use my affiliate code TTPD for 10% off, and I will also get a small commission from the brand at no extra cost to you. Anyway, without further ado, let's talk about my new setup. I thought that a scrapbooking style would suit the Tortured Poets Department aesthetic, so I wanted to use all different kinds of papers to add some texture. I also wanted to keep the color scheme pretty neutral, so I don't get bored with these pages so easily. I didn't have much of a plan for the decorations, and this first spread, for example, I ended up making in the moment. The scrapbook style is more of a relaxed style, and the key with it is to do what feels right, so in my opinion you can't plan it much in advance. I started off by adding the papers on the page and played around with the placement a bit. After that it was easier to glue everything down, and I guess the aesthetic of Taylor Swift's new album leans more towards a grey color scheme, but I wanted to use the supplies that I already had at home and figured that these brown papers would work well too, especially the old book pages, and I used those throughout the setup. I also had this black and white floral washi tape that I thought would suit this theme, so I added some pieces of that to the page as well. This washi tape was gifted to me by the Washi Tape Shop a couple years ago, and I'm not completely sure if they sell this anymore. I will link all the supplies I can find in the description box though, so go check that out if you're wondering what I used. My plan was also to make a pocket in this spread where I would add my grid spacing ruler. However, I somehow couldn't find my previous grid spacing ruler anywhere, so I ended up leaving out the pocket as well. At the time I was filming this, I just didn't have the motivation or energy to make a new one, so I will probably make it later and add that on the left side, as grid spacing ruler is definitely something that I use every time I'm making new layouts, as it makes the process a lot quicker. Oh, and I just realized that I didn't mention that we are making my cover page for this journal, but you probably figured it out already. I had no idea what I was doing, so I just filled up the whole page with different papers and then decided to add a quote in the center. I feel like the lyrics in TTPD are quite depressive, so I quoted the prologue instead, but if these are actual lyrics, feel free to correct me in the comments. I had also made these cutouts on tracing paper, which were inspired by the songs and aesthetics of the album, and I drew this on my iPad and then printed them out on a tracing paper so I could use my silhouette machine to cut them, so I wouldn't have to do it by hand. You could totally just draw everything by hand straight on the tracing paper though, and then cut out all the little pieces, and that would work just fine as well. Anyway, next we are making my future log, and I kept this spread pretty simple so I would have more writing space. First I had this idea that I could use washi tape behind the monthly titles, so I started off by adding this beautiful washi tape that I bought from Paper Monogatari. After that was set in place, I started stamping the headers and quickly realized that my initial idea didn't work because ink didn't get into the washi tape, so it would have transferred everywhere, as you can see. Because of that, I replaced the washi tape where I had used stamps and decided to figure out a different way to add the monthly titles. I'm not sure if my ink was just the wrong type for this purpose, or if the washi tape had some kind of finish that didn't soak off the ink. If you know what is the reason this happened, let me know. This time I didn't use any monthly calendar stickers for my future log because I hadn't had the time to make some, so I ended up just writing out the calendars by hand. It was definitely a bit tedious, but I don't think I messed up any numbers this time, so that was great. It's also very satisfying to see handwritten mini calendars, so I'm happy that I decided to write them this time. I decided to keep the monthly titles super simple and just wrote them with capital letters. I don't write a lot with capital letters, so I was a bit nervous how they would turn out, but luckily they looked just fine. I also could have used stamps for them if I had a bit more writing space. Anyway, next we are making my reflection spread. I realized that I haven't used my previous 2 goal settings pages in my bullet journal at all, so I decided to skip that this time and focus on this reflection spread instead. This year has been very eventful for me, I guess. I finished the training program I started last year and had the best internship experience doing that. Even though I haven't written down my goals for the year, I've still accomplished a lot of little things, and I'm mentally in a much better place than I was in last year, for example. Because of this, I wanted to take some time to reflect on this year and notice everything I've accomplished and learned. Sometimes that works a lot better than focusing on goals and whether you are achieving them, so I guess this is a little bit more gentle way of approaching that. For the header, I used these stamps with capital letters because I felt like the typewriter stamps were a bit small, but in the end I actually ended up liking the look of them more, so I used these capital letter stamps just for this page. I don't use stamps very often because I like writing the titles myself instead, but this time using stamps felt like a must. Anyway, I didn't like that the stamps left these black spots around the letters, so I covered them with my white gel pen, and I also went around the letters so they would stand out a little bit more. For the decorations, I added the same transparent cutouts that I had, and these were a way to tie this whole setup together. Next, I wrote out some questions, so writing the mid-year reflection would be a bit easier. I always like to start the reflection process with questions that bring up the positive things that happened, because my mind easily focuses too much on things that could be improved. Focusing on positive things first helps me with making a change towards a more positive mindset, so I can definitely recommend this if you are struggling with the same thing. I hope that this time I will actually remember to fill this in, and I think I will because I really enjoy pages like this. Next up is my budget tracker, which is basically the same layout that I always use. This is actually more like an income tracker because I track the income that I make from social media, so filling in taxes is easier. I don't write my expenses here because I just don't find that very useful for me, and I can always look up those on my phone instead. When I'm setting up a new bullet journal, I try to make the spreads that I use the most in the front of the journal, so they are a bit easier to find because I don't use an index. I would love to hear if you use an index, so let me know in the comments. I've tried that in the past but didn't find it very useful because I forgot to write the page numbers, and I don't make many extra pages in the middle of my bullet journal that I need to find later anyway. For the title, I used the typewriter stamps because I like the look of them more, and they fit the TTPD aesthetic better as well. I wanted to keep the spread very simple, so I did just some simple collaging on top and then focused on the layout itself. On the left side, I will be tracking my monthly affiliate income, and I have listed all my affiliate codes in the description in case you are interested, and those will give you a 10% discount while I will receive a small commission from the brand at no extra cost to you. Anyway, I think budget tracker, like all the other trackers, are quite personal and you have to find a layout that works the best for you. That's also why I love bullet journaling, because you can customize basically everything and make them fit to your specific needs. Finding the right layout can be challenging as well because you have to go through things that don't work, but when you find the perfect layout, it's really rewarding. On the right side, I'm making a wish list or things to buy section, I guess. And here I will write different things I would like to buy in the future, and also the store where I can find them and the price. I often like to do some research beforehand and find where I can find the lowest price for the item I'm looking for, so writing the store will help me to remember that later. Because I had quite a lot of space on the bottom right corner, I decided to add a little collage there for decorations. I had this big cutout that was inspired by the song I Look in People's Windows that I really wanted to use, and this was the perfect place for that. I also ended up stamping the lyrics on the side because that was looking a bit too empty. When I drew these cutouts on my iPad, I used quite a textured brush so the illustrations would look a bit more hand-drawn. I feel like digital illustrations can often look too smooth, but using a too textured brush can also be a problem when printing the illustrations, and that actually happened with these cutouts as well, so I had to go back and darken up the main outline so they would show up better. Anyway, let's move on to my next spread, which is going to be my plant tracker spread. I'm using the same layout for this one as well, but this time I messed up the second tab, so I ended up removing the tabs from the dot drawers completely, as I was too lazy to plan them beforehand and wanted to save some time. We will see how I will like it, and I think I will have to try a different layout next time, just to change things up a bit. I used an Exacto knife near the notebook's binding, and if you do this, be very careful so you don't cut the actual binding, as that could ruin your notebook. I also used a thick cardstock underneath so I wouldn't cut the other pages. For the decorations we are once again making some collages on top and using the alphabet stamps for the header. In case you are curious how this plant tracker works, I will track the watering schedule of my plants here. I will mark the days when I watered my plants with a circle and add a dot inside of that if I fertilize the plant as well. If you have just a few plants, this probably isn't the most useful spread, but I have over 20 plants at the moment and some of them have different watering schedules. So this spread really helps me to remember to take care of all of them. As you can probably tell, I love plants and I would love to have even more of them, but sadly this is all I can fit in my studio apartment. When I'm going to move to a bigger place, the first thing I will be doing is planning which plants I can get, and my dream would be having an apartment that gets more light, as I now have north-facing windows, which can definitely be a bit tricky to my plants. I would love to hear if you have any plants or not, and let me also know which plant is your favorite. Mine is probably golden pothos because it's super easy to take care of, but peace lily also has a special place in my heart, as that was the first ever plant that I was able to keep alive, and now I've had it for almost 10 years, I think. Anyway, let's move on with my setup, and next we are making a page for my favorites. I love to track all the TV shows and movies I watched during the year, as it's fun to look back and see what I was watching at the time. This year my favorite TV show so far has been Blue-Eyed Samurai, which is actually anime, and I really enjoyed it. Some other favorites have been Baby Reindeer and Fallout and Love is Blind Sweden, of course. I'm always looking for new things to watch though, so I would love to hear which TV shows or movies have been your favorites this year. Besides the things I watch, I also have space for writing out my favorite moments, and then I have a box for some other random things like podcasts, YouTube channels and things like that. I always listen to either podcasts or music while I'm filming my setups, as watching TV shows would be way too distracting. On the right side I made another reflection page, I guess, which is called How I'm Feeling, and I actually made a little spelling mistake and forgot to add the letter N. so I had to fix it by adding some paper on top of that to cover it. The second half of the year can get quite tough here in Finland because the days get really short towards winter and we only get a few hours of sunlight. The idea of this spread is to remind me of things that make me feel good and also remind me of bad habits that I should be more aware of. I, for example, noticed that binge watching TV shows from Netflix is definitely not good for me if I do that too often. Next, we are making the last spread in this setup, which is going to be dedicated to content ideas. I didn't find a YouTube tracker to be very useful for me at this point in my life, so I decided to make kind of like brain dump page instead, where I will just write down video and theme ideas and things like that. I will also write all the questions you ask me here, so I will remember to answer them or make a video surrounding that topic. So if you have any questions, now would be the perfect time to leave them in the comments. Speaking about videos, this was the first time ever that I skipped making a monthly plan with me video, and this video is also going up a bit later than I hoped. The reason is that I have a full-time summer job where I also edit videos, so I'm often too tired to edit videos after I come home from work. I will try to get back to my regular schedule in the fall though, and hopefully I can also make my August plan with me on time. Anyway, I really like how this setup turned out. I know that the cutouts can seem a little bit random if you haven't listened to the Tortured Poets department, especially because I added a dog and a bird on the next page. It was really fun to create a theme based on an album though, as I've never done that before, and I will definitely try it again sometime in the future if I find another album I really like. If you have any favorite albums or artists at the moment, let me know, as I would love to find some new music for me to listen to. Now it's finally time for the final flip through, and I'm really happy with this setup. Tearing up some paper and adding things on top of each other was very relaxing, even though I had more mess to clean up afterwards. I would love to hear what you think of this setup, and let me also know which song is your favorite from the new Taylor Swift album if you've been listening to it. Remember to also leave a like and a bow emoji in the comments if you enjoyed this video. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope to see you in my next one. Bye bye!